Right then, episode 2, Tech Talks Behind the Scenes. So a new podcast series with Storm Talent. Today, we're joined by Steve Coppin-Smith, and a very warm welcome, Steve. It's an absolute privilege to have you.
Well, it's really nice to be on here.
Steve, incredibly well-established dev, architect, head of engineering, and you've reached VP level running a team of 40 plus. A very, very intelligent and clever techies. You're now a founder of a very exciting new business that we'll talk about a little bit later. But we've started our podcast by asking all our guests really to share a bit about what they were like as kids. So how was your school life? How did you get on with it?
You're far too kind, by the way. I don't really know how to open after that. Thank you very much. And yeah, it's really nice to be chatting with you. When we've worked together before, and I remember when you came into my life, at exactly the right time, and you're really, really good at what you do as well. So there's no surprise to see you doing what you're doing now. And yeah, similarly, like you were brilliant. You will be brilliant at your new venture as well.
Thank you.
So yeah, what was I like as a kid? Now I watched your first video with Cam, and I know Cam. I've met Cam, and yeah, far less interesting than Cam. I didn't get in trouble at all or anything like that. But yeah, my childhood was pretty regular, really. Like interestingly, like the other day, my mum visited, and she brought one of my old school reports, so I can almost tell you like what other people's assessment was of my childhood, and it was. The consensus across all the different teachers was, yeah, Steve's really polite. He should really be better at school. So I should be more academic because I was polite. There was some kind of correlation there. But yeah, I think I was a pretty good kid. I stayed out of trouble. And I did what I needed to do at school, but I didn't really push myself. It was all about just trying to get through school so I could play, like find out who was available to play football after school, was the main focus of the school day.
Yeah, I think I was the same. I definitely had potential at school, but then didn't apply myself. I think it was more, let's get out. Who's kicking about after school? Who's playing out? Whatever, all that usual stuff. Yeah. Can you remember your first job?
Yeah, I was talking about this the other day as well, actually. My first job was streaming the paths at my parents' allotment for other people. I was taught pretty early in life how to use a petrol strimmer, and that was a really very useful skill to have. So I used to take it down the allotment, and then people would pay me like a $5 just to go down their path and tidy them up, and it would only take me like 20 minutes. So it was a well-paid job. So I had that. I did a paper round for next to no money. It cost me it took like 2 hours, and I got like £3 for it. And then I remember working at Sainsbury's and worked there for many years. And I just used to go through my shift and just visualize that each hour I was there. I think I was getting something like £3 and 5 pence an hour or something. Shows my age a little bit where that was okay. But when I was like 15, that's how much I was getting. I was raised to consider work like an important part of life. I think many people of my generation. I'm a borderline millennial, like I just got in the start of it, and that work is something of significance and something that you should be proud of and find something that you really want to do. So yeah, growing up, I think finding a job was important, finding a vocation was important, something that I could really dedicate myself to.
How did you get into tech?
My GCSE choices, pretty much. I mean, the first thing was actually we had a computer at home when I was young, and my dad was quite into tech, he had a job kind of for British Telecom, so he was around technology, and because of that we had computer at home early, we had internet at home quite early as well. So it was mostly just by playing with that. I think as many people my age who came into tech, it was through hoping one day to build games. I was part of that kind of gaming revolution where we didn't have things like PlayStations growing up, so when that became available, it was like mind blowing, and it really captured my imagination.
Can you remember what software you might have used to develop games back in the day?
I never got into it. I did a lot of planning with my buddies. Like we planned a lot of games, we had a lot of stuff down on paper, but we never really got into it. I've never really ventured into it.
Now, isn't it, with kids using like Unreal Engine and all these like super powerful tools to create things like real easily?
Yeah.
It's just crazy how much things have advanced.
yeah, I never really got into that stuff. I wish I had. I do remember I was really good at PowerPoint, like early versions of PowerPoint, and that's carried through into my later life. Like I was still very passionate about pretty slide decks.
So you've been a real strong leader throughout your career, and I think you've taken a natural progression and worked up to VP level. You're very gathered, articulate, and I remember thinking this from the first time we met, actually. I remember you can almost see your brain ticking like 5 steps ahead during the call. And everybody that I've spoken to that has worked with you or that knows you speaks so highly of you. I think Cam, that we had on the first podcast, I was, again, really chuffed to have had him on. He was really complimentary too. I know you guys have worked very closely together. For anyone that doesn't know who Cam is, just for the record, he was a hacker who was part of Anonymous. He caused nearly $1 million in damages to SeaWorld, having brought those guys down with a DDoS attack. Anyway, back to this, but I think going back to your management style, given you've seen sort of such success, what do you think are some of the most rewarding things about running teams and managing people directly?
Again, that's very kind of you to say. Thank you for the confidence. I think maybe one of the things I learned early about being a leader was it wasn't about me. Like it wasn't about me bringing in a plan and telling people what to do and like dragging people along. It was all about the people that I was working with. I realized very early in my career that if I'm going to lead a team of say 6-7 people, I'm just one of them. And if I was just to like act on my own intuition without kind of consulting anyone or to kind of steamroll any ideas through, it would just be a crazy thing to do. Why would I consider doing it? So throughout my career, I think people are talking about this more now, but I've always been about how do I get the most out of the people around me, and so much of that is just creating in the environment and supporting them. That's how they're going to be the most productive they can be, rather than cracking the whip. That's never been my style.
Especially in a corporate environment as well, it is very difficult, I think, to show weakness. And I think, what have you found difficult about managing teams?
It's really interesting, like that those 2 points you just made, because they sound quite unrelated, but I think they are, like showing weakness and having difficulty, because I'm never afraid to show weakness. I'm always happy to say what I don't know or what I'm working on or what I'm not good at, and or to say when I'm feeling vulnerable or I'm feeling unhappy or depressed or whatever it is. Like I'm always happy to do that stuff, and I think because of that you form very authentic relationships with the people around you because they feel like they know you, and I think they often want to support you. So then if you think about difficulties, like that's the position you want to be in when you strike difficulty, when you find difficulty, that you have support of people around you. So the difficulty never really lasts that long. Like even if it's, let's say there's a relationship issue between me and someone else, if we both go into that thinking like we understand each other, we support each other, we want to make it better, then that difficulty dissipates very quickly. It is hard to show vulnerability. I'm not saying like it's an easy thing to do, because I think whenever you're going to be vulnerable, there's always that kind of feeling in your head, like is this going to be okay? Like, are there going to be negative repercussions of me showing my vulnerability here? Are people going to think I'm a weak leader, or are people going to think, oh, I need to tread on eggshells around Steve because he's not having a good time at the moment, or something like that? So it's not. Those things can happen. So I think sometimes because if you if you over-index on those things, then you might not feel like you can be vulnerable. And so much of that is down to the environment that you're operating in. And you can be conditioned to feel that way, where you just feel like, oh, okay, no, I need to be strong and powerful in this position, and I can't show any vulnerability. But if you're in an environment that where there aren't negative repercussions, sometimes naturally there are, but at least the positive aspects of it are enough to counter any negative repercussions, and it's a lot easier to be vulnerable in that space.
I think if you're not 100% comfortable with your team and the people around you, I think coming out of your shell a little bit can be quite daunting and a little bit difficult. And I do think that there are people out there that put fronts on to try and cover things like that up.
it can be a little bit catch-22, can't it? Because unless you start that ball rolling on that culture, people don't do it, so you don't see it, so it doesn't like keep the ball rolling on the culture. So I think there's amount of effort that needs to go in at the start just to get that ball rolling, and then when people see it happen and they see, where we were at, in our last place, like the people would see me, be vulnerable, except that I don't know things, except that say that when I was putting forward something, to say that, hey, I'm suggesting this, like I'm not confident in it, like that's why I want your thoughts. That kind of, if they see that behavior and they see nothing bad happen to me, then they feel like they can do it as well. I need to feel like I have authentic relationships. If I don't, then my mind starts spinning on what else might be going on, and I have too long to think about it. So yeah, that authenticity is important to me. So in order to have that authentic relationship, I need to bring my whole self into the workplace.
I think that transitions quite nicely onto my next topic, which I'd like to talk about mental health. I think it's really prominent in the workplace now, and it's becoming, I think, ever more acceptable to talk about. I'm going to put myself out there in saying this, but I think from a personal experience, especially with, I guess, tech companies, I think a lot of companies claim to focus on diversity, inclusion initiatives, but when it comes down to it, I don't honestly believe that there is enough support and understanding in place for neurodiverse individuals. I think it'd be ace if there was more training for people, more understanding, more sessions. I'd be keen to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's like a lot of things in business, when a business needs to learn something, and the world is still learning about mental health, to a great extent. It has been something that we can talk about more openly over the last, let's say, 10, 15 years. I think that's changed, and I'm not saying that it needs to be like a 2-week retreat, but I think it just means, for me, learning about mental health is just keeping an open mind, because it's all around us, right? Everyone has cognitive difference, thinks differently, behaves differently, feels their emotions differently. So if you accept that, and if you go into your interactions with an open mind, then that's a great place to start learning.
I think it was probably around the age of 22, 23, but I started noticing that I thought a little bit different to others. I think I struggled a lot with emotions growing up. I still do from time to time. I think everybody does, but sometimes I can be a little bit too honest. I can be a bit too, bit blunt. I found communicating difficult sometimes with certain individuals. I think not out of, I guess not doing it on purpose, but just genuinely butting heads and just not knowing how to deal with that. And I think when I first came into a commercial environment, I struggled, and it was a real steep learning curve for me. I've got there now, fortunately. But I think at first it was understanding a bit more about myself, taking a step back, understanding how I approach certain situations. I think it's all part of growing up, but more so recently I've wanted to go and get tested for ADHD. I think it'd be important, and I know that there was, I guess, a personal journey that you wanted to talk about, so I wondered whether you'd be comfortable maybe transitioning into that.
Yeah, my own journey, like you, I became aware of mental health, I think, later in life, and a lot later than it from when it started to impact me. So when I was in my like mid to late teens, I had real problems with anxiety. I became very hyper aware of the world around me, and felt very self-conscious. And in my later teens, I had a real problem with like a cycle of feeling feeling unwell, and then feeling nervous about feeling unwell, and then feeling more unwell because I was nervous, and it created that cycle where I was either unwell or just completely checked out of the situation, and sometimes I could ride it out, but sometimes I'd have to kind of excuse myself and see if I was unwell or not, and then come back when I realized that it was all in my head. So that was a very early indicator that I was kind of going through something with relation to mental health. Now I tried to find help in my teens. I tried to articulate that, and I think back then it was still a little bit taboo, so maybe I didn't articulate it well. I don't know. Maybe I didn't want to accept that I had a mental health issue. It's possible. But I basically just didn't get. I was misdiagnosed. I got sent for blood tests rather than kind of psychological help, and it put me off like seeking professional help. And I want to put an early disclaimer out there that I really recommend people try to find it if they feel they need it. But yeah, it really put me off, and I went probably another 10 years like struggling with this, trying to figure it out myself. And when I was about 26, 27, it was causing problems in my life, and I decided that I needed to try again, and went to a doctor, and they were the first ones that gave me the opportunity to see a psychiatrist and to find out and see a psychiatrist to find out what the cause was. And it was then that I was diagnosed with OCD and anxiety and OCD, but it was the OCD that was causing it. So that was over 10 years of struggling with it. But that diagnosis of OCD really opened my eyes to what was happening, with my thought processes, and helped me to kind of help myself a little bit more and learn about it and try to figure out what to do next.
It's really important to get to the bottom of that if you do feel like you're neurodivergent. I know that you've had that for maybe 15 years, and I guess I'd be keen to maybe understand a little bit more about whether it's still prominent, I guess, in day-to-day life now, and if so, where you struggle with it. Like, what is it about having OCD that you find that can be difficult? What is it that can be, I guess, freeing on occasion?
Yeah, I think there are two sides of it. I mean, I think the thing that I've come to realize is that I can't get rid of it. Like it's there, but but yeah, there are some struggles, but I do think there are some benefits as well. So for the struggles, like the main way my OCD manifests is risk aversion, and like I will catastrophize around like all of the bad things that can happen around a situation, and that manifests in kind of like not doing things. Like that's one of the things, but it can also be like silly things like not being able to going back into the house because I'm wondering whether the taps are left on or the doors are locked or anything like that. But I think a message that's getting out there now and helping people is that OCD is about obsessive thought and not being able to let something go. And I think one thing I was told through my therapy is that it's very natural to have that thought. Oh, did I leave the tap running? It's very natural. A lot of people have that. The difference is your ability to recover from that.
There's a member of our family, and this individual struggled with OCD, I'd say 2 years, but it was really, really bad. It was to the point where it was physically affecting her on a day-to-day basis. School life, not wanting to be apart from her mum, and I guess it stopped this individual going to the gym, all sorts of different stuff. And I think on a day-to-day basis, I've seen just how debilitating it can really be, and how much it affects simple things: putting shoes on, getting out the door, getting ready. 2 hours sometimes, and it's very, very difficult. But you can see how much this individual's struggling with it in their own mind, and it's something that I'll see occasionally. But that individual's struggling with that every single minute, and I think there's been times where it's become incredibly frustrating for her. And now we've had it diagnosed, she understands it and she can work through it, and it's almost processed in her head now, so she understands why she may act a certain way or need to think something or not step on a crack or double check. But she often wants things repeating. So if we ask a question, for example, it's pardon, and it's always sort of reassurance. And now we've understood how to deal with that as well. It's become incredibly, a lot easier, I'd say, to manage and deal with on a day-to-day basis, because we understand her a little bit more and we can help her, which is great. But I can imagine for those that don't understand it, don't know what it is, that are undiagnosed, it could become incredibly frustrating and quite difficult to deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, and I think there's definitely those two sides to it. But going back to something you said there, like you're right. Like there are those visible things, like there's the time it takes to like check the taps and all those things, and there are the opportunities that when I say to someone like I just don't want to go. I don't think that's going to be a something that I can or want to do. The the thing that people don't see is how exhausting it is. How exhausting it is to always be in your own head. It's not all bad, right? There are certain things like you mentioned earlier about leading teams, and yeah, and then I said how important the relationships are and things like that. Like I care about those things so much because I catastrophize. And because I worry, like I think that's one of the things that makes me invest in those relationships, because there's a part of me that really wants people to be happy and that really wants us to be successful together and really wants to, you know, you know, have fun and enjoy ourselves as well. Like I obsess over that stuff, and as a result, I've thought about it a lot. And I read about it, I observe a lot, I talk to people about it to try and get better and try and improve. And I think that's brought a lot of benefit to my own career and hopefully to the people that I've worked with as well. So that comes in at least in part from my cognitive disposition, like to concern myself with those things and to obsess about how to make them better.
Prior to Snowplow, I'd worked with a really interesting company called Cognisys. They're an amazing business run by a chap called Chris Quickfall. Now, I think he was probably 18, 19 when he was diagnosed with dyslexia, and he'd struggled through school, college, university, and never really known why, undiagnosed. And I think in later life he thought, I don't want anybody to struggle the way I've struggled. So he set up Cognisys, which is a very, very interesting piece of software. I guess it's a learning assessment. So they'd let's say bring on a college or university or a business. I know they're partnered with companies like Dyson and Holland and Barrett now, which is great. Say you're a student in a college, there's 1,000 kids, everybody will get the opportunity to take the assessment. Should they determine that an individual could have additional learning needs or could benefit from additional learning support, then they will put in place a personalised learner journey. Now, this is really interesting. So it's completely unique for every single user, dependent on how they think, how they learn, how they react to learning practices, let's say, throughout the assessment. And this updates as they go. So let's say 6 months down the line, it'll be different to how it was when they initially started. And it will really help people understand how their brain works and how they're best and able to learn more effectively. And I know myself, if I had that when I was a kid, that would have helped me massively. So, I think looking into tools like that, education around neurodiversity, especially for people like leading teams, I think is so key. I've struggled with people that haven't understood it in the past, and I've tried to explain it. On the back of that, I don't feel that there has been honest support. There weren't any training sessions, even though we had internal L&D. There were no communication workshops. And I just think it's such a shame, if you've got an internal resource like that and somebody that's actively voicing that they're struggling a little bit with certain things, why would you not support that? So I'd be quite keen to sort of get your thoughts as to maybe what companies could do to talk about this and for it not to be a taboo subject anymore.
Yeah, I agree that we should be striving to do better. And I think things like Cognizant can be really good to kind of raise awareness, not only of the individual, but also of the people around them to this stuff. I think one of the challenges, or one of the reasons why it's still taboo, is that many people, and I don't think this is at this time through any fault of their own, just don't feel comfortable having those conversations.
Yeah.
And that's where it kind of shuts down. It's like, oh, this person just told me they're feeling depressed. Oh God, like I'm now like going to be really responsible for this. So they might try to avoid the conversation. And maybe what happens in those cases is it's like, oh, okay, well, there's this like phone number. Here's a phone number, or here's PowerPoint, or here's some
That's what
training,
I've had.
or something.
I've had
It's
here's a
like
phone number.
it feels a little bit empty. So I think, where and again, I shouldn't be giving advice on this stuff, but where I have found it useful is to kind of like is to accept the conversation, and say, okay, well, I want to support you on this. I don't know how, but this is okay. We can talk about this. I want you to be as open with me as you want to be, and let's explore how we can solve this together without me trying to solve your problem. I'm not a therapist, and I shouldn't be trying to solve it, but let me stay in it with you, like, until we've solved it. I think that's maybe the key. Let me stay in this with you. So I'm not just going to give you a phone number and say, oh, well, here's the mental health support number, so can you call that? Okay, good, done. Like, it's to stay in the conversation, say, well, we have these resources. Like, what can we try? What do you want to try first? Let's do that, and then let's have a look at what's happening next. I'm not trying to be a therapist. Like, I'm not, but I'm just trying to, my responsibility as a manager is to help that person to feel comfortable and productive in the workplace. Like, that's what the business needs me to do. So to stay in the conversation and support people through their journey, rather than necessarily trying to solve their problem.
Okay, I'm going to throw a curveball in. Once you've brought on an individual that's neurodiverse, how then do we equip managers to, let's say, deal with any, let's say, knock-on effect that may have? So for me, I'm useless with numbers. I struggle with communication sometimes, and I struggle to organize myself sometimes in certain ways. And in a high-performing environment where there are basic little tasks that everybody else appears to be able to do very simply, but I struggled with that. Slowly but surely over time, that has an effect on a team. And if you're in a team that don't understand that person that is slightly neurodiverse, that can't necessarily perform for that particular task, starts feeling incapable, and they start feeling like they might be the odd one out. And then you don't really want to show who you are and your personality, because you feel like you're letting the squad down. So if you are bringing in neurodiverse individuals, how do you cater for them? And what can we do to shed more light on this? Because I think there's so many more things that people could be doing. And I think I felt like I've let the squad down. Like, oh, why have you not filled that spreadsheet in? Oh God, I'll do it now, that sort of thing. And there's got to be so many people out there that struggle with just basic things. And it appears like sometimes like I was incapable of doing it, but it was just because I struggled and I just needed somebody to understand, and it didn't happen. And I just feel for people that, others that are in the same boat.
The aim always with the team is to be greater than the sum of our parts, right? And to take all those best bits and to complement each other and find the right ways to do things. Now, I'm a fan of like organizational theory and how businesses structure themselves and operate. And we're just transitioning from an era where you kind of wanted like the organization was treated a bit like a machine. And with a machine, if you've got a machine that where the thing is the cog is turning really well, but it's a little bit like this, then it'd be like, oh, okay, well, let's go and get one that fits that box perfectly and performs all the jobs, and then it will be able to do it. And so I think a lot of organizations are still set up where they expect people just to fit neatly within a box and all perform the job that they need to perform. And if everyone performs the job individually, then the thing will work. And that the challenge there is what happens if you do have talent in a position that's really good at one thing but not as good at another thing. And if you start to break down some of those predispositions to having people being able to tick everything on a job board. But if you start thinking about like the chemistry of the team, the makeup of the team, how can these people support each other, then what you actually end up with is something far more fluid and flexible that you can chuck towards different problems. Because at some time during the team's time together, numbers won't be an issue, something else will be. There's quite a shift that needs to happen. It is happening. Like, you're seeing people talking about this more often now, where this diversity within the team can actually give you a great amount of fluidity. And as a business, like, we should want fluidity, like, especially nowadays, like when things can change so quickly. COVID, the economic situation we're in now, like all of these things, like it can just turn a business on its head, right? We've got to do this thing now. The movement of our competitors, the AI revolution, like all of these things that are happening that just make you need to turn on a dime and do something else. If you've got a mass of individuals who are good at the thing that you've asked them to do, and that's the journey that you've taken them on, and if they're going to continue to operate in that structure, you just can't have that fluidity as an organization.
And I think that's what makes you absolutely amazing as a leader. I've brought an issue, you've identified it, you've put a spin on it that works for everybody. Hey, let's think outside the box, bring something new to it. And I just wish everybody shared that same mindset. Really, in a team that I was operating within previously, it was everybody needs to do X, everybody needs to do this, everybody needs to do that. And if you're not doing it, then you're not part of the team properly. You're letting the squad down. Whereas I was crap when it came to the admin side of things. I really, really was. And I struggled with it. So is there not somebody that can help me with that whilst I'm maybe doing something that I'm a little bit more proactive in and something that I can really, really help at? Let's say filling roles. I looked at hiring figures and I was miles above what other people within the team were doing, but I just could not get my bloody admin done. So I think, can somebody help me with the admin and I can go help them with some sourcing, or if there's a hard to fill role, let me have a pop at it whilst that person's helping me do this. And I think if you start sort of pulling different strings here and there and getting sort of a little bit more motion and things working properly, then you get the best out of people. But as I sort of touched on before, as people were chasing me for like basic admin tasks, that was really knocking my confidence, and it did start to affect my mental health, thinking, God, I'm actually going to be able to do this. And I don't know, I just feel like if it was managed in a different way and understood, I'd have been a lot more sort of proactive and a lot more productive in that environment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's horrible not being able to live up to expectations, and it's even worse when you're like trying to live up to expectations, but also you feel like some stuff's being left on the floor as well, some other way that you could potentially push things
You
forward.
don't feel like you can be yourself.
Forward. Yeah,
No.
I mean, one of the things just that I felt like you were great at was building the relationships with the candidates, which at the time, like the supply and demand problem was horribly imbalanced. And if we found someone we liked, we had to really try to get them over to us. So that bit you were super strong at, and identifying talent. So we would have very quick conversations about the type of person I was looking for, and you didn't have the background at that time. You didn't have a long history with the company, even so, and you were able to pick that up very quickly and bring people to the floor and say, well, I found this person and they have this and this and this, and you were really talking to the things that I was interested in. So that identification of talent and building relationships with the candidate, like, better than anyone I've worked with. So the you wouldn't want to lose that. You wouldn't want to hold that person down. You wouldn't want to make them feel like they can't do the job because the admin side is missing. Like all of our jobs, like they require lots of different things of us. Some of them. So I was leader of an engineering function, right? Probably my weakness was my engineering. And I knew that, right? I knew that early in my career, I decided to go to invest more of my attention into the management route and the organization and the motivation of people and think about how to do that than I was into the technology. Now I knew that. So I was like, well, who are my technologists? Who's going to support me here? And I'm going to tell them. I'm not going to pretend that I know everything about technology and come to them and say, right, we're going this way. Like, come do this. Because they'd have just been like, well, we kind of have to because he's in charge, but this is bonkers, and what a terrible position to leave him in. So instead, I was very honest about the fact that, I'm not that technical anymore, and I'm going to need your support. So, if you feel like we're doing something wrong technically, please speak up. And I used that to kind of plug the gap.
Everybody just seemed to work so closely together, and there wasn't almost ego within the team. It was just a machine that worked, and everybody seemed to help each other. And it was lovely. It was a really nice engineering team to hire for.
I loved my time there. Like I think with that group, we had a real bond, and we had that bond because we talked a lot about like what it was that we were trying to create, the things that we valued, the things that we thought were going to make us successful, the challenges we were having. That doesn't mean that we were just you're completely in line and loving every moment with each other. Like we would have those difficult conversations as well. Like there would be people thinking, hey, I'm not sure I see my future here. I think it's going to be somewhere else. And we would have the relationship where we would have that conversation early and have, talk through it and find out, well, what do we think is going to change?
I'm not sure whether you'd be comfortable to talk about this, so if you don't want to, it's absolutely fine. I think it's really important that we do share it if you're happy to, because there will be other people out there that are in that position now that might not have the confidence to do it. And I think it's quite an inspiring story. Would you feel comfortable sharing that?
I find it difficult to talk about mental health. I find it difficult to I guess, to use the phrase we've been using, to be vulnerable, but I have tried to do it when I think that it's going to have a positive effect either on me or the people around me. And one of those early experiences, I was working for a digital agency, and they had a time to talk day that came around, and my boss, we'd spoken about my challenges with anxiety and OCD, and I was going through some stuff, and he was very supportive. And then when it came to time to talk today, he said, no pressure, but if you wanted to do anything, like we'll support it, and we can get people together and get some cake and coffee or whatever it is you need. So that's what we did, and we just had. I just planned to like kick it off really, and just to thank people for taking time out of their day, and thought people would talk about themselves. But I just found myself talking about my experience, and some of the challenges, and getting quite like emotional about it. And that was interesting as well, because it was the first time I'd been emotional in front of that crowd, and kind of going through my head when I'm doing it. I'm like, oh God, am I going to be judged or anything like that? And everyone was so supportive. And we chatted about this previously, but the one thing that I've remembered since is something that happened after I kind of like finally got through my bit and said about some of the impacts that my mental health has had on my experiences. Other people started talking about theirs.
And it strengthens that group. People have shown emotion, they've shown honesty themselves, and it's building genuine relationships. And it's so important to put people in an environment where they feel comfortable to do so. And I think that's half the battle with neurodiversity. I really bloody do. I think put people in an environment where they're supported, looked after, understood. If that person's struggling with something, help them out. Do what you need to do. I think so people are quick to judge. I think if you're not absolutely corporate, 100 mile an hour all the time, then it's seen as weakness. And that's not how life is. People are different. They think in different patterns and different ways. And as you mentioned, it's having that honest, genuine approach and dealing with each situation differently, which is just so important.
I think I never quite figured this out about myself. Because I need to feel comfortable with something. If there's something that I don't understand or feels wrong to me, I quite often have a lot of extra questions about it. So this person, because they knew me, they really liked that about me. They would bring things like half-baked ideas to me to get me just to try and like explore. And they wanted me to kind of, I wasn't intentionally doing this, but just poke holes in it and try and find out, but what about this and what about that? So they were using that talent that I have. But that talent was sometimes misunderstood as me being nosy or intrusive or getting beyond my station, and it's not that. Like, if you knew me, then it's not about that at all. It's just about me like wanting to get comfortable with it. So I always wanted to have the conversation.
Well, we think very similarly there, and I think the way my brain works, it's very fast paced. I'm very analytical. And I'd say binary. It's ones and zeros. It's yes, no, black, white. There ain't no grey. And I think sometimes I can be seen as a little bit blunt, a little bit to the point, maybe a little bit rude. But again, I'm not doing that on purpose. Like, from a conversation, if we're operating quickly and we're in a work environment, I need to know yes, no, why, how are we going to do this? Boom, boom, boom. I think if I'm not seeing benefit from a conversation, I can be guilty of trying to move it on quite quickly to get to the point. And that isn't me being rude. I think I often come away from conversations thinking, oh God, why did I say that? Or bloody hell, like, oh, I hope I've not upset somebody by doing that. But I think it is literally just when I'm in that moment and I'm plowing through and I need to get some specific information and I need it quickly, I struggle with fluff, like fluffy conversations, standing around the kettle, or how was your weekend? Da, 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 da. I can do it for a bit, but after a while I'm like, right, I need to move on from this and start doing, progressing towards the task. And I think you just touched on it. All you need is 10 minutes. Get the information that you need. Once you've got it, blast off. Whereas other people are completely different, and they might need that 15 minutes in the morning talking about the weekend and to get things off the chest. I think the variation in people and brains and the way people think and operate and communicate, it's fascinating. And that's why I love talking to people, because everyone's just so different and unique.
Yeah, and I think this stuff is hard. Like, if you think about how to like transition businesses to be more sensitive to this stuff, like there is a lot of things that probably need to happen. But the first thing you can do is just to be, open-minded and reserve judgment. But I'm a real believer that if you can get someone comfortable, energized, passionate about something, then you'll see their best work. So from a commercial perspective, and we have to look after the commercials, otherwise we won't have a company that's available to even to entertain supporting people. So you have to have commercial success. But I really believe that it's the way to commercial success as well. So I don't think there's any reason not to do it.
I think for managers out there, it's a huge point. Just get your staff passionate, motivated, feeling understood, and feeling comfortable. And I think then you'll definitely see better results from staff. Are you happy talking to us about Waggle?
Yeah.
Waggle is Steve's new company, and I can see very clear lines really in the way that you think and the way that you operate on a day-to-day basis, and how that might transition into new processes and new ways of working. So if you could potentially go into Waggle, explain what it is, why you've created it, that would be awesome.
Yeah, there's definitely an element to it in Waggle. So I think the easiest way I can explain Waggle is to tell a story. In my last company, I built a team of, I understood the importance of certain things to having a productive engineering team. I knew that it was important to have a team that was really good at communication and really understood that pang of when they need to communicate, and they felt it, and they went and did it, and they made sure that the team around them knew things. So when you run autonomous teams, I think a big misnomer about them is that it's like an inward-looking exercise. Like, oh, we've got everything that we need. Let's go. This is us. Let's go achieve these things. When actually it couldn't be further from the truth. One of the reasons I found was that although the people that I was working with and the people that I'd hired, they had this pang. Like, where do you put it? Where do you put it? When you feel that moment of, oh, I've got something that I need to communicate, because we have messaging platforms which are very noisy, very good messaging platforms, good at messaging, but if ever you're trying to find something out, it's really difficult, because you're having to go through lots of different like threads and to try and find out what's happening, and then you're having to read the whole thing to try and discern, like, is that the important thing? No. Is that the important thing? No. What type of important thing is it? So a lot of effort there. So one of the phrases that I used quite a lot in the early days at Snowplow when I was trying to set up this culture is the sharing of pertinent facts, and that was a terrible way to it wasn't very sticky like phrasing for people to remember. But I was talking to a buddy of mine, and he said, well, they kind of sound like signals. I was like, signals? That's really interesting. I think that's the phrase for it. So that's what we're talking about. Like when we discover that moment that has the potential to impact someone else, to communicate that signal. And with Waggle, we're creating a very low bar to doing that, because the most important thing is that it goes out there. We're just asking a few quick questions, like we know who they are, we know what teams they're in, so what team is it related to, what project, where can people find more information. Just capture it very quickly and put it out there in the pool of information that the teams are creating, and then on the flip side, give the people who are consuming that information all of the levers that they need to quickly find the information they need. Like, what's changed that impacts me, what's mentioning me, what's being amplified by the company, what is the company considering to be important from these things.
It's like a smart filing system for high important signals, I suppose, that had been missed on social channels.
You should be my marketing guy. Yeah, it's that. Yeah. That'll be a lot shorter.
Yeah, I think especially in an environment like Snowplow, which is ever changing, they're building a unique product. Let's say there wasn't really, I remember you saying this actually, there's no blueprint for what we're creating here. So especially, there'll be loads of teams out there working on different products, different things, bringing things to market that haven't necessarily been shipped before. And especially when you're in that environment where you've not got a playbook to refer to, it's so important that those key pieces of information don't get overlooked. So I think having something like a smart filing system like Waggle is massive. And I think it's a real gap in the market. So yeah, hats off to you for doing it. I think it's ace.
I think the the thing is that we underestimate or we can't overestimate at least the extent to which software governs the way that we work and influences the way that we work. So I do think that there's room here for a platform that is kind of dedicated to this motion of surfacing the information, getting it to the right people, forming connections between people so that they can progress, whether it's progressing, building on top of a milestone, or solving a problem.
The thing that I find really interesting about this product is I've got it pitched in my head initially as helping tech companies with dev processes or whatever it may be. This could be used in so many different use cases. For example, there's so many different industries that would be able to benefit from using that, and I think it's ace.
Yeah, I think so. It is a communication style, like open, authentic communication, and trying to push that out there in a way that it can be discovered, so that people can act on that information. There's nothing in there that is about software delivery. Software delivery is what I know, and that's one of that's some of my influence. But yeah, I've spoken to family and friends. I spoke to a sound engineer, a lawyer, electronics engineer, loads of different disciplines, and people have said, yeah, we have that problem.
Yeah, I think the example that sprang to mind for me was imagine you've got somebody in a creative agency that's an account manager, let's say, that's looking after 5 or 6 different accounts. They've gone on holiday for 2 weeks, they come back and Sally's been looking after their accounts. You can come on each one, right, what are the top 10 things that have happened within this account, and they can get themselves up to speed real quick. They're familiar with what's happened, right, straight back up to speed, 2 seconds flat. All that information's in one place, good to go.
And so the way that it's delivered in Waggle is admittedly a little bit old school, but I love it. It's categorizing content and providing filters. Messaging platforms are great at collaboration, but that generates a lot of noise. And if you and I were to have a conversation about something, we would probably 98% of the very specific numbers for something I just made up, but a very high percentage of the content would not be the content that people need to see. And it would just be
that's the question. How then do you filter the noise versus signal?
You lift out the signal. So we've had the signal, right? We've felt the pang. We've got to the shareable moment. Let's say we've made a decision. Great, decision made. We shouldn't expect the next person to have to come in and read the whole conversation where we went off piste and we came back, and then we started talking about something else. We came back. We shouldn't expect them to do that. We should just lift it out. And we've said this a few times, invest that extra 10, 15 minutes. Just say, okay, this has the potential to be significant. I'm going to take it out have significance. I'm going to take it out. I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to present it nicely. I'm going to mark it up. I'm going to put it there. From that point, that 10 minutes of effort could generate another opportunity for someone. It could influence their decision making. It could create a connection. It could come back around full circle and support you, because they'll be side by side trying to help capitalize on the opportunity or address the problem. So I really believe that cycle works. I've seen it work in companies at a small scale, but it certainly gets harder when you get bigger, because I think the platforms that you're using to collaborate, they are very highly optimized for what they do, but not highly optimized for this, so it can become harder to find those signals in the noise.
Yeah, okay. I think that's ace. Thank you so much for going into that and talking to us. I think there's one last thing that I want to talk about, and it is going back to the neurodiversity stuff that we were touching on before, and mainly focused on career ladders and career paths. If there was an individual that is neurodiverse and they're looking at, let's say, tick boxing exercises that they need to get in order to get a little bit higher up the career ladder, I think a lot of it can also be subjective, based on a manager's discretion as well. And I think I'd be quite keen to understand, if there is an individual that's struggling with certain areas, is that going to debilitate somebody from necessarily getting through their career a little bit quicker, based on subjective managerial opinion?
It's subjective. So how do we manage the fact that it's subjective? And what we did at Snowplow was we did have a guidance framework, because there was a challenge for a while where having worked with the team for a long time, with the other people helping lead the function, we had very good consensus on the scheme that we were trying to build and the types of behaviours that we thought were really going to drive us forward. We had a very good understanding of that. We used to call it. Oh, this person really gets it. Oh, yeah, this person gets it. And when we were trying to articulate that back to the business to justify why someone needed to be progressed or needed more money or whatever it was, like, it's not enough for us just to rock up and say this person really gets it. Can they have a promotion? But no, you're gonna have to explain it a bit more. We found a really good framework. It's authored by someone called Sarah Drasner, and she open sourced it. And it took us a long time to kind of like happen across that one. We'd seen a lot of frameworks that we just didn't feel were right for us. But when we saw it, we're like, yeah, this really describes, this is it. Like, this is what we've been talking about. These are the behaviors. So we felt it was really good in that respect, and we felt like it left enough gaps for people to perform outside of it in ways that we didn't expect, but still be recognized for it. So like I said, it was subjective. It was still subjective, even though we had a ladder. So because of that, we were bringing in lots of different opinion. So we would have the self-assessment, we'd have the manager's assessment. Everyone would be assigned a coach, and the coach would put forward an assessment. Assessment's maybe the wrong word. It's just notes on the previous period. And then we would bring all those things together, and we would bring together bring a story together with those three things, and then we would have a calibration, which was with all of the leads in engineering, where we would just present back and say, well, this is how we think this person has performed. This is what they've said. This is what we've said. These are things we noticed. This is the message we want to go back. What do you think? And that would then give the ability for another kind of 6 people to tell their stories. And it happened more than once where we would say, hey, I think this person's maybe struggling a bit. Like, we're not seeing this, and we'd love to see a bit more of this. And then someone that we didn't expect would say, I've got a great story where they're doing all of those things. Let me tell it to you quick.
That's what makes you really special as a leader, Steve. It really is. I think the fact that you've recognised that it is subjective and then gone to a wider audience to get input from other people as well. I think it's really important, because it gives people a voice and it gives people a chance to shine in other ways, as you mentioned before. Oh, hey, I've got a great story about when that person has done that. And I think it sheds light from many different angles to really help everybody involved. I've found this absolutely fascinating, and I think I could talk to you for hours and hours, and I think we should probably have another session around communication, motivation, that sort of thing. Was there anything else that you wanted to touch on before we call it a day?
We've covered a lot of ground. I've really enjoyed it. I think just one thing on that last point is like I'm slow to take credit for the success that the teams I work with have had, but they have been successful teams. So I think people might be listening to this thinking, oh yeah, it's great in theory, but does it work? It works. Like, it does work. Like, caring for people, creating that space, giving them purpose, making them motivated and invested in the success of the company. Like, this stuff, it works. It really works. Like, the teams I've worked with have been phenomenal. So yeah, it does. It yields results, and I think we said, just going back to the very top of the conversation, I know I'm making it a really hard editing job for you now, because now you're gonna have to include this, or cut this bit. But at the top of the conversation was like, what was that early lesson about leadership? Is that it's not about me. It can't be. I'm one person in a group of 40, so it can't be about me. It's got to be about them, and it's got to be about creating that space for them. And if you can get those 40 people motivated and productive and pointing in the right direction, that they agree is the right direction, which infers that they've had some say in it, then you'll have success. You have commercial success. So, or you'll be set up well for it at least. So yeah, it works.
Dude, what a way to end. I always enjoy talking to you. You're an absolute legend, mate. So thanks for coming on.
I appreciate you. I appreciate everything you're doing, and I wish you the best with this venture. I'm really excited to see what you do next.
Cheers, dude. Likewise with Waggle, and let's keep in touch. Speak soon.
Thank you, mate.
Cheers.